It's me. It's me. It's EDC, which only means one thing. It's time for Just My Thoughts. Now, if you've been following me, one thing's easily known, easily seen. I always open up with the WWE. So tonight's thought tracker is based just on that, the WWE. So when you think about wrestling, you think about what it's made up of: solo competitors, tag team competitors. You think about factions, and you think about the women's competitors as well. So, in tonight's episode of Just My Thoughts, I thought I'd break down the top five, in my opinion, and the worst five, in my opinion, in all four categories. So, let's get started. So, number one, hands down, greatest of all time wrestler, Shawn Michaels. Sweet chin music, elbow off the top rope, sharpshooter, it doesn't matter. He's going to find a way to get you down, put you down, and make you wish you never even showed up for the match. Number one. Number two, Eddie Guerrero, without a doubt, the best talent in WCW, and then probably in the top five talents of WWE all time after the merger, Eddie Guerrero. Number three would be Seth freaking Rollins. I throw Rollins in the mix of anybody, anytime, anywhere. The guy is great. He's athletic, he's fast, he's strong, he's smart, and he's tricky. He got everything it takes to be successful and has been successful. Seth Rollins, how you doing? You're great. Number three on my list. Number four, Chris Jericho. Number four all time, Chris Jericho. I'll tell you, the Lion Tamer, the Walls of Jericho, everything that he's done, he still wrestles right now. He might be pushing 50 years old, but is still a professional wrestler. Just think about that. He's not even thinking about retirement. Plus, he also has a rocking, awesome band called Fozzy. So if you didn't know that, you know that now. Yeah, Chris Jericho has a rock band. They're called Fozzy. That's a real thing. Check them out. Number five on all-time list, Kurt Angle. And just, Olympic gold medalist, what could you say? I mean, anyone that wrestles for America as a country deserves to be on the greatest of all time list. So I gave him number five. Ankle lock, he kind of did the Three Amigos. I'm not quite sure what he called it. Pretty much three suplexes. He robbed it from Eddie Guerrero, but he was awesome. Kurt Angle was incredibly, incredibly awesome. So on the flip side of that, now let's talk about the five worst. Number one on my list, Gilbert. I don't even know if you guys even think about, oh man, Gilbert, what's that? Well, who's that? That's the guy that, WWF at the time and WCW were at wars, and WCW had Goldberg, and so the WWF did a like a smidge, whatever you want to call that. It's like a mocking version of him, if you will. A little bitty old dude go out there with sparklers all over him, slapping himself around, always lost. I don't even know if they called him Bill Gilbert. I just remember him being called Gilbert. Worst wrestler I've ever seen. How you doing? Number two, we have who's actually very, very, very popular, famous, and well known, Raven from WCW. Yeah, quote the Raven. Quote the Raven. I never really seen him as a talent. I never really seen him as a good competitor. He always was like he cheated a lot to get W's wins. How you doing? He actually had, it was known as the Flock, the Ravens Flock. There was Perry Saturn, Billy Kidman, Raven himself, and then they had one more goon. I don't remember who he was. Shows you how much popular he was, in my opinion. But Raven, yeah, number two worst wrestler I've ever seen in my life. Number three, it's kind of funny to say this, but Chavo Guerrero, right? So on the flip side of that, I just said Eddie Guerrero is the second greatest wrestler I've ever seen. His nephew is the third worst wrestler I've ever seen. If it weren't for Eddie Guerrero, I don't even think Chavo Guerrero would have had any business, any way to even get into wrestling at all without Eddie Guerrero. And he did that for a lot of people. A lot of people don't know that about Eddie. Eddie got Rey Mysterio into wrestling. Eddie got Juventud Guerrero, which was his nephew, into wrestling. He also got Chavo, who was also his nephew, into wrestling. Also, pretty much was the head runner that created LWO, Lucha World Order. Like I said, second greatest wrestler I've ever seen, Eddie Guerrero. Third worst wrestler I've ever seen, Chavo Guerrero. Glad we got that out of the way. Number four, worst wrestler I've ever seen. I don't even know if you guys know this or not. That's how terrible this guy is. His name is Kurt Hawkins. So, I don't even know how he had a job, but he was in the company for like 3 years and never even won a match. So that's pretty. I guess on the flip side, I guess as wrestling fans, as cool as it is to see someone like Goldberg go 187-0, I guess it's equally as funny to see someone go 0 and 187. So I guess that was the what WWF was going for, what WWE was going for. Kurt Hawkins, I didn't see him win a match. I watched him for like 2 or 3 years, just always get hammered, 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 hammered. Just terrible, 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 terrible wrestler, Kurt Hawkins. And then number 5, the worst I've ever seen, Fandango. I don't even know how he was ever in the show. I think he came from like the what do they call that show? The Masked Singers, and then they had like the Masked Dancers and all that, going on in NBC World. But I think that's where he came from. One of those dancing shows, Dancing with the Stars. That might be what I'm thinking about, Dancing with the Stars. But Fandango was a dancer who became a wrestler who really just didn't deserve to be in the ring at all. Was with the company like 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years. I think they even gave him a tag title with another weirdo, but really, was he talented? I don't think so. How you doing? Sorry, Fandango. You are on my top 5 worst wrestlers I've ever seen in my life, and I've been watching wrestling from the age of 10. Working on 35, so do the math. That's 25 years. I watched a lot of wrestlers, bro. You were terrible. You were terrible. Now, let's talk about tag teams. That's something I absolutely love. Anyway, tag teams are like, to me, is one of the most exciting things about wrestling, right? So anyone can go solo, but at the same time, it's not like a real physical fight. So you really don't know who's going to win. Usually the popular guy always wins. That's just how wrestling works. And it's the same thing with tag teams, but, not all of them are popular, but all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them are good. They can put on a show. That's the thing. You want to watch the show, you got to watch tag team. They do it all. So let's go with the number 1 tag team of my lifetime. Definitely New Age Outlaws. I mean, Road Dogg Jesse James, Badass Billy Gunn. How could you not love that? I mean, they were entertaining, they were funny, and they were serious. Like, they won the tag titles 12 times, I believe. I believe that's something. And which they're not even the record holders. I'm not quite sure who the record holders are, but I think it's between them and the Dudley Boys, actually. I think Dudley Boys have it by 1. I think they won it 13, 14 times. They brought them back about 5 or 6 years ago just to, be claimed as the number 1 tag team, blah, blah, blah. But in my opinion, the number 1 tag team is New Age Outlaws. Number 2 tag team is Edge and Christian. Especially if you think about 98, 99, 2000 era, those guys were tackling people in ladder matches. Like, seriously, the Hardys were hanging from the titles. These were tackling people off of the titles. So those guys would do whatever it took, whatever the company asked for. As Christian, they kind of did it there, and they were like explosive too, because they weren't really big mammoth athletes with muscles, and they were just fast. They were smart, and they were just lightning quick. I mean, it was just the execution. I think that was one of the best finisher moves in the 90s. So, and then the spear too, right? Like, everyone knows Goldberg for it, but outside of Goldberg doing it, Edge did it. Roman Reigns is doing it now. So the spear's kind of been around. So, and I think that has to do with the Edge. I think Edge and Goldberg equally kind of made that thing famous. So I just, tip my hat to him being the second best tag team I've ever seen. Him and Christian were awesome. Number 3, I'd have to go with Brothers of Destruction. Of course, you gotta love Kane, you gotta love Undertaker, you gotta love everything that they've done for primarily 25 years. Those guys were the monsters and the animals of the WWF world, WWE world, wrestling world, whatever you want to call it. Vince McMahon's world. Kane and the Undertaker, Brothers of Destruction, they were awesome. And on the flip side of that too, you got to go APA, which are the Acolytes and what was like Acolytes Protection Agency. That's what they called APA, Acolyte Protection Agency. Anyway, Farouk, Bradshaw, 2 big mammoth behemoths. Loved it. Farouk did the Dominator, which is pretty much it's like a pump handle power bomb. It's almost like a pump handle scoop slam, except for he turns it into a power bomb. So, Farouk was like that. He was innovative. He would create moves, auto moves. He was really awesome. Ron Simmons, Farouk, same guy. Just look him up, man. If you don't know a lot about competitiveness in the ring, Ron Simmons tops the cake. And he was also a professional football player too, by the way, if you didn't know that. So he became a wrestler after his football career. Just an awesome guy. Farouk was really awesome. Bradshaw was really awesome. both of those guys. Actually, I think Bradshaw was a football player too, in a different league. It's not the NFL. It was like it was American Football League. Some before the NFL had pretty much bought all rights to football. There were two competitive sports. And oh, I'm looking for my tea. I gotta go get some tea here in a minute. So in the United States, anyway. So there you go. Two professional football leagues in the United States, and Vert and Bradshaw played in both of them. So APA really awesome. And then also, Hawk and Warrior, the Road Warriors. I said that really backwards. Excuse me. Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors. There you go. It's like, here's the thing. Those guys, when you don't think much about them. These guys just went in there and beat people up, right? They weren't really good wrestlers, but they were good powerhouses. And plus their makeups were cool, right? They had the little spiders and their, drawing on their foreheads with the white and the red, and they had the football pads with the spikes on it. Road Warriors always looked awesome to me, so that's why they're in the top five. Okay, like I just did a minute ago, we're gonna flip down to that to the worst five I've ever seen. This is gonna catch a lot of people by surprise because a lot of these names are actually popular names, and some people will be like, "Oh my God, I love those dudes," and it's just part of wrestling. You're just gonna have people that love them, and then you're gonna have people that not love them. Again, this is just my thoughts. So, how you doing on that? Worst five. I can tell you the worst, number one, hands down, worst tag team I've ever seen was fan favorites in the 90s. Too Cool, right? Scotty Too Hottie and Brian Christopher. Outside of those guys bouncing around and dancing around and throwing all the hip hop music and doing all the DJ stuff, like outside of all that, what they did in the ring, what, the worm? That's what they brought to the table. They brought the worm to the table. So, really terrible tag team. Number two would be, again, popular guys, the Headbangers, Jazz and was it Thrasher, Jazz and Thrasher, or Moss and Thrasher, whatever they were called. The Headbangers guys come out there. They had the kilts and they had the black paint across their face, and they just always did like a mosh pit, stupid crap. But usually when they got in the ring, they got their butts kicked really quick. Usually about 5 6 minute matches, and then they were just out of there. Again, fan favorites. People loved them in the 90s. I just thought they were ridiculous. Did not think that they were very talented, but really in the 90s, when it comes to talent and tag team, the Edge, Christian, that was top tier talent. So it wasn't a lot of talent in the 90s in the tag team division anyway, which is why there was always teams just made up on the fly. Like Brothers of Destruction just came out of nowhere. APA, they come out of nowhere. Um, how about the third worst group that I'm about to name, the Rock and Sock Connection? Let's be honest, everyone loves The Rock, right? And then there's hardcore legends and fans that they love Mankind, but when you put them together, they clash so much. Mankind's just going to run around and do his best to get beat up, professionally, and then stick his hands down your throat for the mandible claw, which later he put a sock in his hand and became Socko, the Rock and Sock Connection. But on the flip side of that, The Rock was great, though, right? Most electrifying man in WWE sports entertainment. And he had millions of Rock's fans. Yeah, with the rock bottom and the people's elbow. And, he even also did the sharpshooter, which was kind of impressive. He wasn't much of a, submission artist. But if he did go for a submission, it would usually be the sharpshooter. His bread and butter always been Samoan drop, people's elbow, get up, rock bottom, you, 1 2 3, you're out of there. But as a tag team competitor, I thought it was terrible. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was a horrible idea for him and for Mankind both. I enjoy Mankind getting thrown off Hell in a Cell. I do not enjoy Mankind trying to be tag team champions. Just my thoughts on that. So, and then, oh yeah. Number four, how about the League of Nations? The what? The who? The win? The League of Nations, I don't know if you even remember this, but Jack Swagger and Alberto Del Rio around 2012, 2013, 2014, the All-American Jack Swagger teamed up with Alberto Del Rio. They became League of Nations. It was just a terrible idea because, first of all, Jack Swagger was a terrible wrestler. In general, Jack Swagger never did anything. And in 9 years of competing, did he ever impress me one time? So I never really found him to be a very good wrestler. So on the flip side of that, I did think Alberto Del Rio at one point in time was a really good wrestler. In fact, he was a world champion 5 times, I think. Um, Very, very impressive solo career for Alberto Del Rio. But as a tag competitor, he might have done great if he had a different partner. But he had a horrible partner and had a horrible tag team duo. And then, I'm going to list something that was actually a fan favorite about 2015, 2016. The whole world loved them, but I thought they were ridiculous. How about The Bar? If you don't know who The Bar is, it is Cesaro and Sheamus. They don't raise the bar, they are the bar. Now, again, if you talk about Solo, I think Cesaro was always snubbed. I thought he was really great. I thought he would have been an incredible Intercontinental Champion. Thought he probably deserved to hold that title and hold a record for that title. That dude was a beefy powerhouse kind of guy, but in a regular body. That's just, and it was so cool because like he's smart and he's a brainiac. Like he speak 9 different languages. He's ex-military from a foreign country. Just a lot of good things you can say about Antonio Cesaro. I thought he was a great competitor, but and then Sheamus too, solo. Sheamus speaks for himself. He's ex world champion, ex United States champion, ex tag team champion. The only belt Sheamus hasn't held in his entire wrestling career is the Intercontinental title. And that keeps on getting snubbed by him. I don't know why. Maybe it has to do with age. It doesn't make sense to really put a belt on him because you don't know how long he has left to wrestle. So I guess it kind of does make sense. The IC title is second most important title in WWE. Everyone knows that. Always has been. Always will be. Nothing will ever change. You want to be an IC champion at some point in time in your career. It's just what people dream for. So again, together, they were terrible, man. They were just horrible. They didn't compete well, and I don't even think they lasted longer than a year because they don't raise the bar. They are the bar, bar none. They were trash, terrible, terrible, terrible. Now let's talk about something that's a little bit fun to talk about. Let's talk about factions. Number one faction in wrestling history, in my opinion, definitely D-Generation X. You had to love that growing up, right? It didn't matter if you were an adult. It didn't matter if you were a teenager. It didn't matter if you were a kid. People from all ages absolutely loved everything that they did from the beginning all the way to the end. So when I say that, I say this. At the beginning, it was Shawn Michaels. It was Triple H. It was China. Shawn gets hurt. He gets off the show for a little while. And then Triple H is like, what the fuck? I got to do something. Sorry about my language. Excuse my language. But that's, exactly what he said. That's what he had to do. He had to figure it out. And he figured it out pretty well, right? He brought on the New Age Outlaws, which is Road Dogg Jesse James, which is Badass Billy Gunn. Then he brought on X-Pac. He still had China. And they just kept it going. Like I said, number one faction in history, in my opinion, definitely D-Generation X. Well, who's number two? Who's number two? I'll tell you, Evolution. Evolution has got to be the second greatest faction that I've ever seen in my life, and also it was built by Triple H. So the fact Evolution, in case you don't know who Evolution is or was, because it's a was, it's not a is. Triple H, Dave Batista, Randy Orton, and Ric Flair. And here's an interesting fact about Evolution. Each of them all were world champions, not simultaneously, obviously, because at that time there's only one belt. I mean, really, it should always have been that way, one belt, but different timing, all of them champions. Toward the end, Dave screws over Evolution and later becomes a champion, blah, blah, blah. Randy Orton, they gave it to him as his rookie year. He got to win it. Triple H has been champion 14 times. Of course, he got the helmet or hold it. And then, because Ric Flair is Ric Flair, he's the nature boy, he had to get it, right? He was on the show. They had to do something with him, had to do something for him just for his legacy and his career. They gave him the title in like 2005, I think it was, so something like that. Don't really stat me on that, but it was somewhere close to that. Like I said, Evolution was really young during the merger. It was like the first big time, faction after the merger of WCW and WWE. So second greatest faction I've ever seen. And again, second faction started by Triple H. third greatest faction I've ever seen. Number three on the list is Brood. Who's Brood? Who's Brood? Brood is Edge and Christian and Gangrel. They, did bloodbaths against everybody that they fought. Even like they didn't take shots at nobody. They didn't care who you were. They give Undertaker a bloodbath. They'd give Kane a bloodbath. If you had to fight them, you were getting covered in blood. It's just how it worked. That was awesome. It was exciting. It was funny. It was cool, man. Especially for anybody who was like, on the gothic side of life, that was kind of different, or like a head rocker or a metalhead or whatever you were at that point in time. It was just really cool, really interesting to see everything that the Brood did. So definitely number three on my list, the Brood. Number four on my list is no other than Judgment Day. And you're like, well, what's the deal with Judgment Day? Well, it's basically Brood version 2.0. Again, it was, created by Edge and then took over by Finn Balor. But a lot of the same thing. A lot of your metalheads, a lot of your, it's different style. It's okay to be gothic. It's okay to be dark situation. But that stuff sells. There's people in the world that are like that. And they got great competitors. Finn Balor is awesome. I think Damian Priest is pretty awesome. Really, everyone in the world should think Rhea Ripley is pretty awesome. And then, obviously Dominic doesn't fit in, but that's his problem. He's trying to fit in anywhere that he could fit in. He probably should have just kept on hanging out with his dad. He would have eventually, found a luchador to fight with, but no, he wants to hang out with the Judgment Day, so it is what it is. Fourth best faction I've ever seen, and fourth coolest faction I've ever seen in my life. And then number five, and I really don't even really want to put him on there at all, but you can't look up wrestling without seeing it. So number five greatest faction of all time is the NWO. No, World Order. And again, the only reason why I say that is because of the history behind it. If you look at wrestling videos, you're going to see NWO everywhere. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and then Hollywood Hogan. It's just, the original trio of the NWO. That's what it was. And it was cool. It was cool for, because WCW had to come up with things and had to find ways to compete against the WWF. And they did have a lot of talent. They had Chris Jericho, they had, Eddie Guerrero, they had Goldberg, they had the NWO, they had a lot of talent. Ric Flair was over there, Lex Luger's over there, Sting was one of their premier guys. So bringing on the NWO was just good for WCW. And in fact, some might say it's what destroyed WCW, but for about 3 to 5 years, it was pretty fun. It was pretty entertaining. It was pretty wild. NWO, fifth best faction I've ever seen. How you doing? And besides, if you can't call yourself a wrestling fan if you don't enjoy something about Hulk Hogan. So like, when the whole Andre thing happened, WrestleMania 3 or whatever it was, like I probably wasn't even born. I was probably a kid if I was born. So I didn't get all the Hulkamaniac stuff that happened in the 80s. I didn't get none of that. What I got was, in the 90s, what was going on in the 90s, and NWO was going on. That's what I got from the Hulk. So that's why I like it. That's why they're on my list. So let's talk about the five worst. What? You just talked about the five best. Yeah, I know. That's what we've been doing. We've been flipping top five to bottom five. So number one worst I've ever seen in my life. This is funny because they were funny. They were a funny group. And later on, one of them became a very, very talented wrestler, but the three-man band, how about that? Heath Slater, how about that? Jinder Mahal, and then again, Drew McIntyre. It was a terrible idea, but they rocked it for almost a year. Couldn't really get nowhere, couldn't really sell no tickets. But it was kind of funny to see Heath Slater come out there and do his little thing. And, at that time, Drew really didn't develop into his body, so he looked like a little weirdo, just he didn't fit in, and neither did Jinder Mahal. But later on, few years after three-man band, Jinder Mahal put on weight and became aggressive. And actually, I think he won the title, but then lost it like months later. But they were terrible together. And actually, I only brought that up because Drew McIntyre now would probably be top five best competitors on the roster. And I'm not kidding you. When you think about who's on the roster with Roman Reigns, with Brock Lesnar, you'd think about Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre had the belt just a few years ago. He's a big guy now. He's still fast. He's still strong. He's still agile. And he's still young. Drew McIntyre is probably going to be on the show for about another 5, 6, 7, 8 years. That's just the truth. He's awesome. The transformation he took to go through his body, the body change, everything, the hard work, the hustle, it's all paying off. He deserves it. He's huge. He went from a green bean to, a monster machine. So I do like Drew McIntyre, but again, Drew McIntyre, you are part of the worst faction I have ever seen. Three-man band. Are you kidding me? Get the fuck out of here. Three-man band. How about this? How about the oddities? I don't even know if anybody even knows about these guys. That's how terrible they were. Golga, Luna. I think big man's name was Ivan. Just a really, really terrible group of the 90s, the young 90s, when everyone was trying to fit in because DX was going on. People just started throwing bands together. And so the oddities were part of that. And then the acolytes became part of that. Undertaker created the acolytes. And then also what became part of that faction during that time. Well, Brood was probably during that time, or it was during that time. But again, oh yeah, that's what the Job Squad. The Job Squad was part of that time with Al Snow. But all those guys kind of fit in, except for the oddities. Just really weird, just really boring. Just every time they were on the TV, I was like, get the hell out of here. So didn't really care nothing about the oddities at all. Another one is Nation of Domination. I thought that was terrible. Again, I love The Rock, but anytime you team The Rock up with anybody, it was terrible. And Farouk was part of Nation of Domination as well. D'Lo Brown part of Nation of Domination as well. The Godfather part of Nation of Domination as well. All these guys are well known. All these guys are well decorated. But again, when you put them all together, you got like 5 guys that could all be stars. It was terrible. Oh yeah, Mark Henry. Mark Henry became 6th man of Nation of Domination. And they did him wrong, right? Eventually they broke off and called him sexual chocolate and did the whole fake baby with Mae Young thing. It's just terrible when he was young. When he was young, they put him through hell. Mark Henry, that's the truth. And again, part of the Nation of Domination, definitely the 3rd worst faction I've ever seen in my life. And then, so 4th worst is, I've already mentioned this, the LWO, Lucha World Order. So that was during in the 90s with NWO. So what happened was after NWO kept on running the show for about 3 years, everyone got sick of it and started banding together. So then you had like Team WCW, and then you had the NWO Red and Black, and then you had the LWO Lucha World Order. And it was just terrible. You cannot take 5 luchadors and put them in a group and think that it's going to be enticing. It's not going to be enticing. Eventually, you're going to run out of gas. Eventually, you can't flip, you can't flop, you can't dive, you can't jump, you can't hop, jump, skip, do all the things that luchadors do. When you got 5 of them, it gets really, really, really repetitive. So you're not seeing something that you haven't already seen, and it becomes very, very, very boring. That's why you're number 4 on my list, Lucha World Order. Get out of here. And then number 5. Number 5 is, I mentioned this one already too, the Ravens Flock. Here's the thing about that. I found it really boring, and that was also during LWO, NWO, Team WCW, and then the Red and the Black. Raven had his flock, and it was just really again, Raven's flock. I found they had good competitors. Perry Saturn was pretty good. Billy Kidman was pretty good, but just being barked around by someone who sat around with long hair and a jean jacket and jean shorts and really didn't wrestle very well. None of it really made sense to me. I felt like they just give him the camera because his dad was rich or something like that. So that's the truth of how I feel about Raven's Flock. You're in the top 5 worst I've ever seen, faction or not. How you doing? All right, now I'm going to clean up the rest of this episode with the 5 greatest women I've ever seen and the 5 worst women I've ever seen. Okay, number 1, Charlotte Flair. Can't argue that. 14-time women's champ. Number 1 on my list. Number 2 on my list is actually Bianca Belair. I think Bianca Belair, the EST of the WWE, is the 2nd best woman I've ever seen. She's bad to the bone. She's fast. She's strong. She's smart. She's electric. She's entertaining. Everything she does is great. I hope she holds on to that title for a very long time because she's 2nd on my list. Number 3, Asuka. I think Asuka is very, very talented. Comes along with that Japanese background, which I kind of like anyway. I've always kind of liked Japanese background wrestling. Um, for instance, Tajiri, I thought Tajiri was very good. Uh, what is they? Taka Michinoku, thought he was good. Light world heavyweight champion, actually light world heavyweight champion 4 times in the WWE. Um, and the Great Muta, right? So here you go. I like Japanese wrestling. I just do. They do. They do. It's like a. So when you're watching Japanese wrestling, it's almost like getting a karate show. It's almost like luchadors mixed in with Jackie Chan, right? That's just it's what you get, and it's entertaining. Well, it is for me. I mean, if you like martial arts, you like karate, you must like Japanese style wrestling. It just works. Number 4, I give to Becky Lynch the man. And I think that's the only reason why she's on my list is because it's so funny. Irish girl. She talks with a really deep voice, and she's actually married to Seth Rollins. So it's she's got talent. He's got talent. They're a talented family, talented couple. But she's won the title, in her own right. She's been champion 5 times. She's been on the show about 8 years. So, in an 8-year span to have the belt 5 times, that's pretty damn good. Almost every other year you got the title. You can't really argue about that. Becky Lynch, number 4 on my list. How you doing? And then number 5, only for the only reason why she's on my top 5 is for length of career. But how about Natalia? Natalia started wrestling at the age of 22. She's been on the show for about 14 years. She's 36, 37 years old, almost pushing 40 years old, and still does it every Monday night, every Friday night. She was just in WrestleMania this last weekend. So Natalia, good job to you, girl. You're in the top 5 greatest wrestlers of all time, in my opinion. Again, this is just my thoughts. You're watching Erick Coughlin. Now, who are the 5 worst? Let me break them down. The 5 worst. Okay, number 1. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense too. So number 1, worst female wrestler I've ever seen in my life. How about Alicia Fox? So all Alicia Fox ever wanted to do was just like run around and be cute, be funny, and be like extremely like a spoiled little rich kid on camera. That's all she really wanted to do. That's all she really did, in my opinion. Flirted a lot with JBL, which is fine. I don't care. You can flirt with whoever you want to flirt with. Do whatever you want to do. But in the ring, in your business, you were a professional wrestler, and you were terrible. Probably never deserved to even be in wrestling. That's just the truth. Alicia Fox, you're the worst I ever seen. How you doing? Who's the second worst I ever seen? Let me tell you. Tamia Snuka. This is surprising to me because, her dad is Jimmy Superfly Snuka. In the 70s and the 80s, everybody knew who that guy was. So everyone you would think would know who his daughter is, and they probably do, but they know her for reasons of this. Like, she's part of a great bloodline. That's it. That's all they know. They know that somewhere down the road, she's The Rock's cousin, which means somewhere down the road, she's also related to the Usos, which means somewhere down the road, she's also related to Raymond, which also related to Rikishi, also related to like all the 90s that Samoan wrestlers that were going on. So her family is historic. And I tell you another thing that's historic, her win-loss record is garbage. Every time she's in the ring, I'm not saying she's never won a match, but I'm just saying every time I see her in the ring, I see her getting her butt kicked. You always expect something big. You think she's going to do so great, so big, so strong, so masculine of a woman, like she's supposed to be Beth Phoenix 2.0. Here's the difference. Beth Phoenix was a champion several times. Tamina Snuka, you will never be champion. I've never seen you be one, and I don't think you ever will be. You're definitely number 2 on the worst women I've ever seen in my life. Sorry, Jimmy, but your daughter's no good. Number 3, 4, and 5. All right, I got you. Luna. I don't know if you guys even know who Luna is. You should know who she is. She was like Goldust's sidekick. I can never say that they're a married couple or nothing like that. I don't really know. It's none of my business if they were, if they weren't. She was also part of the Oddities as well. Really weird, off-looking, creepy, ugly, like biker wannabe chick. Just really, I've seen her wrestle about 3 or 4 times, and just could not hang as a wrestler. Now she did okay. Like I said, she was Goldust's sidekick, so I don't know if it was manager. I don't know what was going on. So she did okay with that. She did okay with, ring parents without being in the ring, if that makes sense. A lot like Paul Heyman. She's like the woman version of Paul Heyman. And she's also the 3rd worst I've ever seen. How you doing? Number 4, Ivory, same thing. So Ivory, she became the head runner of PMS, which is Pretty Mean Sisters. which was her, Jacqueline, and eventually they recruited someone else. I think they like somehow Stacy Keibler became part of PMS, but like she was backstabbing him with Michelle McCool. Either which way, Ivory. I never seen you do nothing but lie, cheat, and steal like you're Eddie Guerrero's wife. His problem is you wasn't Eddie Guerrero's wife. I believe you were actually the Godfather's wife, and you were just terrible, terrible, terrible wrestler. How you doing? Sorry, I'm just calling you out. You're a trash wrestler. Sorry, sorry, sorry. And then number five, and this is sad because she's very talented. How about Naomi? Naomi, why is she on your worst five? I'll tell you why. So she goes out there with all the neon lights and she's dancing and she's skipping and she's looking all cool. But like, her finisher move is, jumping up and smacking somebody in the face with her butt. Like, instead of clotheslining somebody, you're gonna just jump up, spread your legs, do like a jump up like a cheerleader. Like if you want to be a cheerleader, just go hang out in Dallas, call the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm sure you can get a job. You know how to dance, you know how to jump, you know how to do all the stuff it takes to be a cheerleader. You do not have anything it takes to be a professional wrestler. Again, you're in my top five worst women I've ever seen. Naomi, how you doing? So, that being said, it's getting late. I'm wrapping this up. If you like what you seen, you like what you heard, you can always feel free to cash at me, Erick Coughlin, #Coughlin Pride. Have a nice day.